The Nolan is actually basing the movie off of a modern translation that's more geared towards feminine friendly or whatever. This is obviously a big
Yeah.
topic at the in general is the big topic about modern versus old language, which I actually find silly because I don't know. First of all, if we're going really based off it, we'd be listening to it in Greek. So people like complaining about it not being in Old English or whatever doesn't really make sense because it wouldn't even translate to Greek that well anyway. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but I think that whole discourse around the movie is actually funny.
Well, I think it's interesting. So the book that you're talking about is Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey, and I mean it's pretty notable for being like having, like you said, modern language, and supposedly it's more representative of females in the story and like more focused on their perspectives and all that. And I think that's an interesting choice, especially the like you said the modern language aspect of it because whenever we've seen these old epics adapted, they've always kind of gone with this whole, high speech, very formal, very like they're giving a oration, right? When you think about things like Troy and Gladiator and kind of the classic way of doing it. So the choice to do modern language, especially, is really, really interesting, and it seems to have gotten not been taken very well by the vast majority of people after the trailers dropped. So
Yeah, it's been a lot of interesting discourse on it just because I actually don't mind. I don't mind watching, the Odyssey turn into what we speak today. I think it translates. Actually, I think in a way that saves it. That's actually one of the perks of the movie for me because I think it will translate to younger generations and maybe they'll get curious about the Odyssey, which is okay to me. Just like No Fear Shakespeare, I think it's called, which like dumbs Shakespeare down or translates it in the modern language to make it more adaptable. I think that's a way to keep older books and older texts alive. I think it actually saves it in that way, and maybe we'll get people interested in older literature. Maybe it's like a refresher almost. But I also think it's important to have refreshing takes based in the time that we're in, which is okay with me. Where the movie gets wonky to me, and first of all, I'm a huge Matt Damon lover. Think it's weird. I don't know. I just can't picture him being Odysseus. It's strange to me. Strangely, I do love Robert Pattinson in the trailer. I didn't think I would, but I don't know. He's a good actor, so they're all good actors. So that's not the problem. The discourse is, first of all, people don't know what ancient Greeks even look like. I think, which is a huge problem. The masses, at
right.
least. I mean, if you read the text, if you read the text, they're pale skinned. A lot of them, especially Northern Greeks. I mean, I've been to Greece 5 times. Northern Greeks are still pretty pale. There is the Turkish crossover, which I think people think of as Greek now, the modern Greek. But even
Mm-hmm.
if you like Alexander the Great's army, if you look at the historical text, it's a lot of blonde people, a lot of pale people. You can actually trace the genetics in Pakistan and Afghanistan from Alexander's army. And I actually saw this
Mm-hmm.
first in Pakistan. I saw this guy that was very clearly of like the Alexander's army's genetics because he looked like he belonged in Thessaloniki. Um,
Hmm.
so it's been interesting discourse as far as that goes because people are comparing ancient Greeks to modern Greeks. We live in a time of movies where people want representation, but the representation's all over the board and kind of wonky. And I don't know whether Nolan is doing all this on purpose to like.
So this was one of the things that I had that I wanted to talk about is like I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, right? I love a ton of his movies. I've always loved a ton of his movies. And I've always thought that he was one of the best directors. So when you're talking about him, adapting something like the Odyssey, it seems like I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and think that he's, going to do a great job. The problem is that when you start to see things like he's basing it off of this modern translation, and then the trailer comes out and it's got these kind of weird notes that seem a little off, you're kind of like, and then again, you hear that he's basing it off of a book that's the modern interpretation of the Odyssey, not the actual source material.
From a different lens, not even just change.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm kind of the target audience that would say like, oh, Christopher Nolan's going to do a great job. That was actually my initial, and now I'm a little shakier on it, but I still have a lot of faith in my man Christopher Nolan, honestly, because he's given us some pretty awesome movies. But I mean, I do get where people kind of are coming in, especially with some of the casting choices. Like, the whole thing about Elliot Page being cast, that's a pretty interesting choice. And we don't know who Elliot Page is playing yet, but I don't know. I'm curious to see once that comes out.
Well, you have two castings. If Elliot Page is rumored to be Achilles, you have two castings that people are really like kind of up in arms about, which is Helen of Troy and
Right.
Achilles, even though only the ghost of Achilles. But both characters in the Odyssey, in the original text, have description. They have very, very defined description. So this is one of those things that, purists they have an expectation of what is in the book translating to what is on screen. And it's not, I don't think it's anything against the actors, because both actresses, or the actress that's playing Helen of Troy in the Odyssey is great. She's fantastic. I don't think anybody would dispute that. I
Right.
think people's issue is just it doesn't match what they know of the Odyssey. And that can cause a conflict of interest between literature versus adaptations, right?
Right, for sure. And I think another thing to think about too is how much of the, you know, controversy around this movie is based off of a lot of people having seen Troy and having those characters in mind. And, we kind of, I mean, for a lot of us, especially people your and I age, we saw Troy kind of in a formative time, and it was a big deal, And I mean, when I think of Achilles, I mean, I think of Brad Pitt. I don't know about you, but like that's definitely the image that I have in my head without even having to go anywhere. It's the first thing that pops up. So, I
Yeah,
kind of wonder if that's part of it.
I do think that's hard. First of all, because in Troy, Helen is, first of all, the actress is like picture perfect, right? For compared to the literature part. I don't want to say that the actress in the Odyssey is not picture perfect. She's very beautiful, but if you're going off the original text, you can't get
Right.
any more picture perfect than Helen from Troy.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I'm a super Troy nerd. First of all, I went to Cannickley in Troy, where the actual horse from the movie is still there on the beach. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
It's super cool, and um, even back then, I was like, "Huh, Brad Pitt as Achilles? Okay, sure, whatever." Of course, we do know, if you know the Iliad, you know that Troy is also not accurate literature wise. It is maybe historically more accurate, but nobody knows because there's been like five. I mean, Troy has been rebuilt 5 times, so it's hard to
Right.
know, and the history is kind of in and out. But that take is more. I don't know who the director was. I can't think of it, but that take is more historical compared to literature. So even that is very far off, which is some of the discourses. People are using the argument, well, the Odyssey doesn't have to be accurate because Troy isn't. But that doesn't really work. Like, yes, that's true. I mean, I would love to see Troy with the gods. I'd love to see Athena and Zeus and Troy more, and have the gods interact. Because I did a mythology class where we actually read the Iliad, not the whole thing. We read like excerpts and pieces of it, and then we watched Troy and compared. Obviously, they're pretty far off from each other. Still a good storyline. So it's not saying Nolan's also can't be a great movie, because Troy is arguably a pretty great movie, at least like you said, for people that watched it back when we did, back when it came out, and still, I still think it holds up pretty well, but it's still not accurate literature wise. It's still not the Iliad put into a movie.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, hold on, I got my dog trying to get on the couch with me. Um, yeah, man, I don't know. It's one of those things where people are up in arms about this adaptation. And the question is, and, the thing that people always say is it's not the casting choices and different things, they're not accurate to the source material. But people weren't, like you said, people weren't upset about the casting choices and stuff not being accurate to the source material for the original Troy movie. And then, you see a lot of other things that come out, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like this isn't super historically accurate, and it's not accurate to the source material either. But people aren't as up in arms about it. So the question is, what specifically about Nolan's Odyssey is so controversial and is causing so much backlash, right? And another question is like, is it all going to come out in the wash? Like, is he going to put out an amazing movie and people are going to completely forget about all this controversy? Is that
I mean,
possible?
my issue is I don't know now with all the controversy if it's either going to be really good or really bad. I don't see a lot of wiggle room. I don't see a lot of people taking the middle ground and being like, yeah, it was okay. I think people are now going in with expectations. I think when you're someone like Nolan, you have expectations anyway, right? Just like Spielberg, just like these big directors, there's expectations.
Right.
Uh, and I think now, first of all, we live in an age where people like to be triggered. Back when Troy came out, none of these topics were even a thing. Nobody was talking about, oh, does this person look Greek as we know Greeks today? Is this person match historical Greeks? You know, where are the gods from the Iliad? Nobody really talked about that. And if they did, it was small circles. Now we
Right.
live in where people are like, that casting choice is stupid. This person's color doesn't match. This person's hair doesn't match. And to some extent, I mean, to some extent, certain books I do want them to match, especially when the descriptions are like really potent, when they're key, when they're important, and also just as like a person that loves Greek history and loves Greek myth and everything. Obviously, I have certain expectations that maybe others don't have, but we do live in a time where it is a lot more tumultuous for directors, for casting, for translations, for adaptations, all of that. It's a lot more tedious and a lot more wild today than it's ever been. Obviously,
Yeah, and I think Robert Riley in the chat here, he had a really good point. He says, I think it's a different time. Too much information comes out too early, and people push to nitpick. And I think that's really actually very accurate. People, you definitely see outrage build up super quickly because of the internet, because people are on this 24-hour news cycle. So, you get one little inkling like Elliot Page might be cast as Achilles, and all of a sudden people are just talking about it, talking about it, and it builds like snowballs so fast, to the point where it just becomes this thing where people aren't actually waiting to see, if that's actually true. And then two, if the performance is going to be good and how much of the movie is it going to be, because if the rest of the movie is amazing and there's that one casting choice, is that going to ruin the entire experience for you? I mean, maybe, but I don't know.
for some people, it might. When you're talking about a demigod, basically, you're talking about a hero. You're talking about an important literary figure to a lot of people. You're talking about the Iliad. You're talking about this big thing. So seeing someone, and no offense to Elliot Page, seeing someone that doesn't represent what you expect of Achilles. I mean, Brad Pitt barely measured up, and he's Brad Pitt,
Right.
in my opinion. So Brad Pitt, which is like a man's man, a woman's man, everybody's man, really. Everybody loves. He's Brad Pitt. Still
It's,
barely to some people being able to measure up. Like, who really can? And I think that does impact a movie, whether it's a small role or a big role. I mean, look at all the controversy around Tom Holland. Everybody's hating on, and I love Tom Holland personally, but
well, I think the
everybody,
Tom Holland one is interesting because I feel like that's less based on the casting and more based on the dialogue, like we were talking about before. Because the pushback has been mostly about the whole "my dad is coming back" or whatever that he says in the trailer, and it's like that. I think that's an example of how choices in the movie, like certain choices in things like dialogue and things like that, can really impact how a movie is taken, how it's received. And I think there's a reason that movies like Gladiator and all these swords and sandals movies that came out back in the day use this very epic style of speaking, even though it isn't, like you said, I mean, they would have been speaking in Greek. And, we don't really know what they sounded like back in the day. We know what Greek sounds like now. We don't know how they talked. I mean, they could have been really informal in the way that they spoke to each other, you know? But they could have been, I mean, they could have been using the Greek equivalent of dad instead of my father, whatever you want to say. But by the same token, we as a society have decided that, when we represent this period, this time period, and how we see this is how they talk. So going outside of that, I think it just throws people.
well, it does in books, right? And this is a big topic in the indie community is if you're writing medieval setting, you have to write medieval English. But the only reason medieval English was even a thing is because that's what they were speaking at the time.
Right.
So lot of people argue, well, we're not speaking it now, so why should we write it now? Now we're translating it to our time, which I actually agree, and I think that widens it for readers, but it doesn't mean I don't appreciate the other. I think both can coexist, and I think both are beautiful, and I think both are important.
Right.
But I do think there is this expectation, and whether this is modern for Nolan or not, it would have been cool to add in some more Latin-esque terms or some Greek words just here and there, just to have a feeling, like a feeling of where you are. Of course, the whole thing doesn't need to be in Greek or Latin or whatever, but a few words here and there, which we haven't seen in the trailer, probably don't exist based on the adaptation that he's using. But it would be cool to kind of have that, right? And I'm curious what people in that part of the world, I should ask my friends, I have plenty of friends there, what they feel about it. Because I know the Greeks have been up in arms. I know there was some movie and the Greeks were mad. This is like a year or two ago because all the castings weren't Greek at all, and they were all these different castings, and they were really mad because they were like, "This is not Greek. These people
Right.
aren't. None of this is Greek." I'm curious, kind of what they think about it. I mean, I haven't seen any discourse around Matt Damon being Odysseus. Not that I'm sure, not that I'm convinced anybody could say much because Matt Damon is a top tier actor. He's Matt Damon. I don't know if anybody really wants to say anything about that. And I think the other casting choices have thrown people off so much that I don't know if it really matters.
I was I was gonna say I saw like a couple of things online when Matt Damon was first like announced to be Odysseus, and people are kind of like, this is a little weird, but then like it quickly just got paved over as soon as all the other stuff about the movie came out. People are pretty much like, all right, whatever, we moved on to the next thing.
Yeah,
No
I
one
think
really
it
knows.
oh, Matt Damon's Odysseus, and then it got steamrolled by all the other casting choices, and everybody's like, no, Matt Damon's the best out of all of these. What the hell else is
Right now the question so the question that I have is like, if this movie is bad and like it genuinely is like a flop, how much do you think that will affect Nolan like as a director? Because I mean he's probably one of the biggest directors working right now. I mean,
he's been on the downslide for what, 8 years now or so, as
you think
far as
so?
his ranking of movies go, as far as audience appeal goes. Not that he's still not
Yeah.
top notch, but as far as audience appeal goes, he's kind of been on a downswing. And I think
Yeah.
tackling something like the Odyssey is either going to revive him or I think it might actually damage him because I think it's a big task. He's taken a lot of creative risks. He's
Right.
taken a lot of, as far from casting, translation, modern English, all this stuff. He's taken a lot of risks with it. So I think it's either really going to pay off or it's really going to be like people are going to be like turned off. I don't
Right.
know. I think he's taken a really, really big swing, which it's going to go one of two ways. Like I said, I don't know if there's a lot of wiggle room in there.
It's it's hard because it's like it's such a when you look at it, it's so outside of his normal wheelhouse, right? Like it's nothing. I don't know, man. It really came out of left field when he announced that he was going to be doing the Odyssey. I mean, I remember people were like, "Where? Why? Like why is he choosing to do this?" Because I mean, when you look at all the movies he's done in the past, it's so different and such a different like subject really for him. I mean, he usually does sci-fi, kind of like thrillery stuff, and I mean, war movies, I guess, like the occasional thing like Dunkirk or something. But
But the
really
Odyssey,
like,
if you think about it, he's really good at gritty. He's good at dark tones, and he's good at character-driven plots. The Odyssey really has all three of those. So it's different in the way it measures up to his other movies, but in like the foundations of what he creates, it actually kind of fits.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think for the spectacle aspect, it fits. He's a big set piece guy. I mean, the whole thing with Oppenheimer was that he created a nuclear explosion without CGI. Well, a nuclear explosion without CGI, and that's obviously his big thing. And I mean, it's cool. I think he will have some. I think no matter how this movie is received and how it turns out, I think it'll have some amazing visuals.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
I mean, visually. I mean,
right?
just watching the trailer, aside from the castings and you being curious, I think the problem is everybody's wondering. There's so much wondering that it's hard to get. The trailers are beautiful, they're spectacular, like you would expect. but I think we all have something in the back of our head like, what is he doing? Why is he doing this? How's it going to turn out? And I think that's a downside for him. And I think, as our watcher mentioned earlier, we live in this age of everything being in your face and so quick, and everything coming early now, and so much discourse, that it's kind of making it hard for people to grasp onto, I think. And Nolan is a master of not giving too much. He gives enough to get you,
Definitely.
but not too much compared to a lot of other directors and a lot of other people that release trailers. So he has this huge sense of wonder. He's been dropping, little hints here and there, and he's been dropping actors all over the place, but not saying what they're doing. He's been doing all of this stuff. And I mean, it seems purposeful. And not knowing him, but knowing of what I know of him, it makes sense. But I think it's caused a lot of like a swirling effect. I think we're all just
Yeah.
swirling this movie, being like, what is happening?
Yeah. I mean, I can't. I agree. 100%. I think a lot of what's going on with this movie is that it got some negative hype, and Nolan, like you said, he doesn't he gives you just enough to be interested, but I think that can backfire for sure because there's not enough for people to really know what's going on. It's more just enough to speculate on. You
Right.
know?
And having in some ways, I think works for you, but I also think it works against you, because if the movie isn't as good as people expect it to be with the cast that it has, then I think it works against you because you have such a high quality cast. And we've
Yeah.
been seeing that in the recent years. I mean, you look back at things like you said with Gladiator, and they weren't like the biggest names in the world back then. I mean, Gladiator is realistically what made Russell Crowe to most of us, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
so I think when you measure it up to things like that, and then you measure it up to the text, it's a lot. And I think we face this a lot. I mean, we live in an age right now of retellings. As
Yeah.
indie people, we look at, you're on Threads or Twitter or whatever, and you see retelling of this, retelling of this, retelling of this. Everybody's retelling.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, you know, we definitely live in a time where I think original content is good original content. Let me put it that way. Good original content is rare, and it's very, very important to recognize when you see something like that is actually good and is worth investing in, because like you said, so much stuff. I mean, when you look at like the biggest hit shows on TV now, for instance, just as one example, almost all of them are based off of like some sort of pre-existing property, whether that's a book, a previous movie, a reboot of the TV, it's a reboot of a previous TV show. I mean, very rarely do you see things that are original, and when they are original, they tend to be not that great, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, living in a time of living in a time of adaptation, and living in a time that we live in now with social media and all the wishy-washiness and all the triggering. I mean, we live in a rage bait world the last few years. Twitter
Yeah.
rewards rage baiting. Threads loves rage baiting. People love rage. It seems like people like to be angry. People want, and we, as indie authors, we know people love to tear stuff down. Actually, I just saw a popular indie author, I forget her name. She posted she's going to be taking a step away from Twitter, X, whatever, because she likes to read for enjoyment and wants to be read for enjoyment and not be read to take her down, basically, not to read to judge others and everything. And I think we live in a time where, especially lately, it seems people like want to read something or watch something just to find something wrong with it, just to critique it and be like, I hate this about it. I hate this about it. And I
Yeah.
used to live in a time of wonderment. I mean, that's one thing you can compare to Troy to the Odyssey. I think back then we watched Troy and we were like, whether you knew the Iliad or not, you're like, whoa, this is epic. This is cool. This is an adventure. It's, fun to watch. Good
Yeah.
actors. Like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily match the Iliad, but like the historical aspect and the way they did it, super cool. I mean, the battle between Hector and Achilles, and then Prim going into Achilles' tent and everything, like all that stuff was powerful, and none of us were like, I want to screw this movie. I want to take it down. But I think now, so long after, we live in an age that's like that. I think people just want to grab at the movies like the Odyssey and rip it down. I mean, Gladiator too, because we brought up Gladiator. Was it a perfect movie? No, not by any means. Was not a perfect movie. But
Yeah.
the last 10 years, we've been really lacking on visually appealing, good movies, like that look good without all the CGI and stuff. And I actually thought Gladiator 2, first of all, had a good role. I mean, it had a good cast, and I actually enjoyed all the visuals. I was like, oh, this is like feels like an old school good movie. I mean, this yes, storyline stuff was off and stuff was kind of wonky and whatever, but like as far as visually appealing movies go in an age of like Marvelization and everything, I was like, okay. And I kind of hope Nolan is bringing that to this. And that's one thing I do hope he is bringing that he's been pretty successful at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I I am hoping that this movie, for everything aside, I'm hoping this movie is successful because aside from like you said, Gladiator 2, we really haven't seen a lot of these kinds of movies in the past decade. I mean, what other you know adaptation of a classic, epic kind of story have you really seen that much? Or like even an original one? You don't really see a lot of them. It's mostly a lot of like, Marvel movies or like adaptations, and the big summer blockbusters are based off of pre-existing properties like that. Um, it would be cool to kind of see a return to that things that we had a lot when we were younger and that were really popular. Like I remember, I mean, how amazing were things like The Patriot and like Braveheart and some of these amazing, and The Gladiator, some of these really amazing stories that are his kind of historical, loosely, you know, but also just they have that grandeur to them, and they have that big spectacle and they have that feeling of being really, really, uh, a really, really grand sort of movie. A blockbuster, I guess, would be the right term, but more in the old sense.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I just watched Rome a few months ago again, and for those people that do know, Rome fell short because it got rushed because they ran out of money. Because back then, that it had a huge budget. Back then, that didn't really exist. You give it 10 or 15 more years when you get Game of Thrones level budgets on HBO,
Right.
then the show could have been insanely successful, and that
Yeah,
gives
for
them
sure.
a chance because Troy had a good budget, but the Odyssey lives in a time where these budgets are better, they're higher, they have more money to work with, and that gives them an, an upper hand. And I think looking at something like Rome, if it happened right now, the series, it would be absolutely phenomenal. I mean, between props and between finances and everything, it would be stellar. And I do
Yeah.
hope it's successful, even though I don't agree maybe with the adaptation. But like I said, I don't necessarily agree with Troy's adaptation. I love the movie, whether that's for nostalgia or for what the director did and what the screenwriter did. The story and everything, and the casting was fine to me. Look? Do I look back and be like, well, it'd be interesting to see Troy, but with like the actual gods like the Iliad had, pairing them together? Yeah, that'd be cool. But does that make the movie bad? No. The Odyssey, I mean, I don't know this translation. I don't know Emily's work. So I have
Right.
no idea what to expect. But I am hoping that there's a faithfulness to it, at least, as someone that is an Odyssey fan, as someone that does have hopes. And I mean, who was Odysseus in Troy? It was like Benjen Stark, right? From Game of Thrones?
Yes. Yes.
That's what I thought. So that's the
Apparently, Mike
original.
Mullman's. Uh, oh, he's talking about Rome.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. That was. I guess that was like one of the originators of soft porn.
Yeah, I was gonna say. HBO was the cutting edge back in the day. It was definitely the most risque thing on one of the most risque things on television for sure.
It still is. I mean, all they've done is really up their game. All that's happened is their soft porn has gotten really good.
Hey man, it's the it sells, right? I mean, they got to go with what
Euphoria
sells, huh?
Is Euphoria HBO or is that Stars?
No, I think it's I think it's HBO. I've never seen that show,
Me
but
neither,
I
but
think it's HBO.
I know they're doing all kinds of sex stuff that's going all over that people are all pissy about or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping that there is some callback to the actual text as it was. And I hope that Nolan, casting choices aside, I hope that the movie at least works. Do I agree with all the casting? No. Does that mean I won't see the movie? No, I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it in theater. I'm gonna hope to enjoy it.
Mike Molman says the 1989 NBC Odyssey is the standard. I don't know if this movie will measure up. Mike, I'm pretty sure I have seen that, and isn't that the one with like the really shitty claymation, like just absolute garbage effects? Because I'm pretty
That's
sure I've
also
seen that.
that's like what the old heads said about Dune. Remember they were like, "Oh, I don't think Dune's gonna measure up," and you watch like the original Dune, and you're like, "This is so awful. Everything about
Yeah,
it's absolutely terrible."
there's definitely a sense. I think there's definitely some nostalgia clouding some people's, remembrance of what those were like. Some of the older adaptations and things.
Well, like you
But
said,
yeah,
that's gonna be an issue with Odyssey, I think, is measuring up against Troy. You have Helen of Troy in the Odyssey versus Troy. You have, for me, it is weird because I see Benjamin Stark as Odysseus in my head now because I've watched
yeah,
Troy. I don't even know, probably 200 times, honestly. So going to Matt Damon is weird in my head because I just have this visual. And in that, I mean, that's a thing from literature to movies, right? You watch something first. I mean, I watched Game of Thrones before A Song of Ice and Fire on purpose because I didn't want the books are way better.
right.
So, but I do when I read, I do have Peter Dinklage in my head as Tyrion, no matter what.
I mean, that's the magic or the whatever you want to call it, the side effect of having an adaptation. You know, I mean, honestly, it's interesting to see, for example, like they're adapting the Harry Potter movies again, and it's interesting to see new. I mean, I haven't really watched the show much, but to see new characters because for so many people, the original cast is who they have in their heads now. You know, you can't really get away from it. So what I think that's kind of an interesting thing that definitely happens is like once you adapt a series or a book or whatever, any property into a visual medium, it so overtakes the original source material in a lot of people's minds, in most people's minds. Because even if they don't like it better, it's hard to like not see that person, you know. It kind of becomes the more universally accepted version just by default, you know.
I will say this. I will say this next week when we're talking about Wheel of Time a little bit more. But watching the show, and I watched part of the show. Now I'm reading the books, and I went back and watched the show after I read book like 7 because I was curious. And looking at the covers, I actually like. I feel like Rand from the show actually fits better than Rand on the covers from how I read him and view him.
Right.
And I hate the show for anybody watching. I think the show is terrible. But
You
the
and
casting,
everybody else.
well, yeah. But the casting for Rand, I'm actually like, oh, I actually like him more than I like the Rand on the covers as Robert Jordan's artist portrayed him. So it is interesting how that kind of works.